Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm Annette Young. Transforming a society after a civil war is far from an easy task. Sri Lanka once dominated world headlines for nearly 30 years as government forces fought the Tamil Tigers, a group fighting for a separate Tamil state in the northern and eastern parts of the country. They were militarily defeated in 2009, although the root causes of this ethnic conflict still remain unresolved. Now, all too aware of this is Amnesty International South Asia's Deputy Director, Dinushika Dissanayake. She has been awarded the Chirac Foundation 2018 prize for her work for preventing conflicts and joins me in the studio today. Thank you so much for your time and congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, this is an island nation where the conflict is still far from over, despite the fact that the end of this war occurred, more than 9 years ago.
Absolutely. Next year, May 2019, we will be meeting 10 years since the end of the war. But in terms of key aspects of transitional justice, especially on accountability, Sri Lanka still has not been able to deliver to the people, especially to the victims and to the families of those victims.
Why is that happening?
For the last 3 years, to be honest, many of us who work in the human rights sector were hopeful that the government would be able to deliver on transitional justice promises made in UN Resolution 30-1. It appears, though, that political will and different actors and different pressures are preventing the government from delivering on those promises.
So what is the situation for the Tamil minority, which I think is roughly around 20% of the population? What is their situation like at the moment?
I think the north and the east continue to be areas where there needs to be further investment by the government, not only in terms of developing the areas, but also in terms of delivering truth, justice, reparations for the people who have lived through 30 years of war. For them, the war still has not ended. Their daily struggle continues every day, especially for those who are struggling for truth. The mothers of the disappeared have been protesting at the roadside for over 500 days. Some of the lands grabbed by the military still have not been returned. So for them, the war continues.
Reconciliation is important for any country, any society that's undergone a brutal conflict like what we've seen in Sri Lanka. How difficult do you think it is for the Sri Lankan people to actually reach that point?
I think for the Sri Lankan people to reach reconciliation, there has to be a clear political will to deliver on all of the aspects of transitional justice, be it truth, be it justice, be it accountability. As long as the political leadership does not deliver on one or more of these aspects, the majority is not going to bow down, or they're not going to recognize the rights of all the people who live in Sri Lanka, including the minorities. And therefore, for genuine reconciliation to take place, there has to be prosecution, there has to be accountability, there has to be truth and justice. We need to know, where did all the disappeared in Sri Lanka go? As far as Amnesty has estimated, there's over 60,000 people who have been disappeared in Sri Lanka. Where did they go?
Now, a recent UN report found that the Sri Lankan government, as you were just saying, has not complied with human rights and transitional justice commitments, while making it clear, it says, that the Sinhalese dominates the government at this stage, and as a result, the alienation of ethnic Tamil continues. So you're talking about a large majority still running the show, yet it's dependent on that majority to change mindsets, to be open to the idea of actually pursuing justice. Do you think that's at all possible?
I think it's going to be almost impossible unless the majority decides to share decision-making and government responsibilities with all of the people in Sri Lanka, including the minorities. Therefore, there has to be local decision-making processes where the minorities have a say in what is invested in their regions, what decisions are made in their regions, what the priorities are for their regions. Until there is power sharing, until there is a mechanism that is recognized centrally for power sharing, we can't have true reconciliation in Sri Lanka.
But we're 9 years on, and that still hasn't happened. So what will it take in order for that power sharing to be implemented?
I think Sri Lanka has a great opportunity. We have been talking about a constitutional amendment since 2015. The people of Sri Lanka have been very involved in this process, and with the delivery on that promise, there is a great opportunity to share power in a way that gives that power to the minorities and to the regions. This opportunity, 2019, might be the year that Sri Lanka can do that.
But you say that given that political instability remains a problem within your country. I mean, the fact is that only recently the president sacked the prime minister and then reinstated him.
I think the political instability in the last weeks, from October 26th onwards, really should not be seen as a sign of instability, but as a sign of hope, because the institutions that are supposed to guard justice and to guard human rights and democracy in our country really came forth. The courts, the Supreme Court, stood with the Constitution and protected the Constitution in a way that really inspired all of us who have campaigned for justice and for independence of the judiciary. And so I think 2019, with the new Prime Minister, who has been reinstated now since last Sunday, 2019 offers a great opportunity to finally deliver on promises that were made in 2015, 3 years ago. And as May 2019 approaches and 10 years since the end of the war approaches, this is the time for Sri Lanka to really look back on the mistakes we've made historically and to remedy those mistakes, to share power and to make all Sri Lankans equal.
But is there enough will in order for that to change?
To be honest, the political will has not been apparent so far. Within weeks of Resolution 30-1 before the UN in September 2015, we had senior leadership of political parties saying that war heroes would not be prosecuted. And so we're still looking for that change. The political leadership has to change its mindset, if not for human rights, for its people.
Now, as the host of the 51%, the network show on women, just what sort of role are women playing in terms of rebuilding Sri Lankan society?
Unfortunately, women have a very small role in government in Sri Lanka. As you may have heard, the political representation of women in parliament is very, very low. It's less than 5%. It was only February 2018 that we had a quota for women in local government. And so women have not been given roles within government for decision making. But if you look at the grassroots and the activism, it's the women who have really come forth, calling for justice, fearless in the face of so many threats, and by the combined forces of the government. It has been women who have been on the streets asking for truth and for justice. It was women who demanded the list of surrendees in the last stages of the war from the president, and he promised to give it to them, but we still haven't seen that list. So women have great potential. They need to play a big role in transitional justice. If women are given that space, I think justice and human rights in Sri Lanka will see a new day.
Do you think there will come a day where all communities can live side by side peacefully in Sri Lanka?
I think that's definitely a possibility, but for that to happen, there has to be a change in political mindsets. I think the party politics, which are determined along ethnic lines and religious lines, have to be a thing of the past. The government really needs to embrace all of its people and the equality that we should all enjoy.
Is that more likely with a younger generation coming through, though?
One of the issues and the crises within political leadership in Sri Lanka is the fact that young people are not given opportunities to come up. In the last political instability that we just spoke of, we also saw the way in which members of parliament were bartered from side to side, and sums of money were allegedly paid. This does not bode well for young parliamentarians, for young members of political leadership. So this will need a paradigm shift. And I think working with youth will be critical if Sri Lanka is to meet its transitional justice goals.
So what about the role of the international community then?
The international community played a big role in Sri Lanka's Resolution 30-1. If it wasn't for the international community's participation, Sri Lanka would not have committed in that way. now that it has, I think March 2019 is an opportunity to ask Sri Lanka, what have you done for 3 years? Where are your promises on accountability? Have you delivered on truth and justice? And so the international community really has an important role to play, especially given Sri Lanka's dependence on the West. And our role, I think, would be to ask the international community to continue to keep Sri Lanka on the radar, to continue to ask the government to deliver on human rights promises.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for this edition of the France 24 interview. Do stay with us here because there will be more news and headlines coming up very shortly.